Story title: I sent money to my parents for a year, only to find out they secretly went on vacation with my sister. When I cut them off, everything fell apart. Everyone, please listen. Betrayed Sacrifice, Part 1. I used to believe that family was my safe haven, a place where, no matter what happened, I would always be willing to help without hesitation. That's why, for the past year, I had been sending my parents $600 every week, totaling over $30,000, a significant amount, especially for someone who wasn't a millionaire like me. I didn't have a luxurious income, nor did I live in extravagance. I worked hard, cut back on my own expenses, and sometimes had to give up things I wanted just to make sure my parents could pay their bills, buy food, and cover their living costs. I didn't do it because I expected gratitude or praise. I did it because I believed it was what a child should do when their parents were struggling. My dad had lost his job, and my mom had called me in tears, saying they didn't know how they would make ends meet without help. I didn't hesitate. I transferred the money immediately, and from then on, every week without fail, I sent them money. But then I discovered a truth that shattered me. My parents weren't struggling as badly as they claimed. They weren't living on the edge like I had been led to believe. While I was pinching pennies to support them, they were using the money to go on vacation with my sister Laura, without even telling me. I only found out when a neighbor casually mentioned that he had helped take care of their house while they were away. At that moment, I felt completely numb. Everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed, what I had considered my responsibility, turned out to be nothing but a lie. And the worst part? None of them even felt guilty about it. The Betrayed Sacrifice, Part 2. I sat there, phone in hand, but my mind was completely blank. The numbers in my bank account danced before my eyes, every dollar I had transferred to them over the past year playing like a slow-motion film. Every time I had worried whether I had enough to cover my own expenses, all of it now felt like a bitter joke. When I confronted my parents, I didn't know what I expected. An apology, some remorse, or at least a reasonable explanation. But instead, my mother crossed her arms and sighed in frustration, as if I was the one in the wrong. "We're not obligated to tell you everything we do." I laughed, but it wasn't a laugh of amusement. Not obligated? Then what about me? I wasn't obligated to send you money every week either, but I did. Not because I had extra, but because I believed family was supposed to help each other. And what did you do? You lied to me. You took my money and went on vacation with Laura without saying a word. At that moment, my father finally spoke, his voice low with an underlying threat. "Watch your tone." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "No, I won't watch my tone anymore. I have bent over backward to help you, and yet you don't even respect me enough to be honest. You didn't just lie. You manipulated me into believing you were struggling while you were out spending my hard-earned money on a vacation." My mother waved a hand dismissively, as if I was making a big deal out of nothing. "Mike, you're making this all about money. Why do you always have to be so calculating?" That was the final straw. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and canceled all automatic transfers right in front of them. My mother's eyes widened. My father clenched his jaw. For the first time, they actually looked worried. "Mike, don't do this. You know we're still struggling," my mom pleaded. I just shook my head. "How much are you really struggling? Enough to afford a vacation, but not enough to live without my money? If Laura is your golden child, let her take care of you." And with that, I turned around and walked out, leaving them standing there, stunned and speechless. When I got home, my girlfriend Anna was waiting on the couch. I sank down beside her, exhaled a long breath, and said what I should have said a long time ago. "I'm done. I'm not sending them another dime." Anna just smiled, as if she had been waiting for me to say that all along. If this story feels familiar to you, or if you've ever experienced a similar situation, leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next part of the story. The Betrayed Sacrifice, Part 3. The next morning, I woke up to a phone that wouldn't stop buzzing. Missed calls, voicemails, text messages. My parents, my sister, even some distant relatives. They were all trying to reach me. I ignored every single one. By noon, the knocking on my door started. Loud, aggressive. Anna looked at me, raising an eyebrow. Tell me you didn't invite them. I shook my head, already knowing who it was. When I swung the door open, Laura was standing there, arms folded, looking furious. Behind her, our parents stood awkwardly, as if they weren't sure how this confrontation would go. Are you seriously punishing Mom and Dad just because they went on vacation? Laura scoffed. I let out a dry laugh. Punishing them? No, I'm just finally standing up for myself. I've been giving them money for over a year, stretching my budget thin while they lied to me and used me. And you knew, didn't you? Laura rolled her eyes. Oh, please. No one forced you to send money. You did that all on your own. My jaw clenched. You're right. They didn't force me. They manipulated me. Every phone call, every sob story about how they were struggling, it was all a setup while they were secretly saving up for vacations with you. Finally, my mom spoke up, her voice laced with fake hurt. That's not fair, Mike. We really did struggle sometimes. I smirked. Struggling so much that you asked me for extra money for medicine while sitting on a beach? That shut her up. Laura sighed dramatically. Look, this is stupid. Just turn the payments back on and let's move past this. I stared at her in disbelief. You think I'm just gonna roll over and keep paying? No, you pay for them. For the first time, my dad finally spoke, his voice filled with pride and anger. We don't want your money. I crossed my arms. Good, because you're not getting it. Laura let out a bitter laugh. Wow, so you're just going to abandon them? Before I could reply, Anna stood up from the couch, walking over with a cold smile. Abandon them? You mean like they abandoned him? Lied to him? Used him? Laura turned to Anna, her expression twisting with disdain. Oh great, your opinion. Before anyone could react, Anna grabbed a fistful of Laura's perfectly styled hair and yanked. Listen carefully, she said, her voice eerily calm. You and your parents are never coming back here. Mike is done with you, and so am I. Now turn around, get in your overpriced car and leave. Laura yelped, desperately swatting at Anna's hand until she was finally released. She stumbled back, looking utterly outraged. You're crazy, she shrieked. Anna grinned. Try me. For the first time, Laura actually looked scared. She turned back to our parents, expecting them to defend her, but they just stood there silent. I think they finally realized they had lost everything. Laura huffed, straightened her outfit, and threw me one last glare. You'll regret this. I just smiled. Not a chance. And with that, she stormed off, our parents trailing behind her like lost puppies. As soon as the door shut, I turned to Anna, still shocked. She shrugged. What? She deserved it. For the first time in days, I laughed. Remind me never to piss you off. And that, my friends, was the moment everything changed. No more guilt, no more manipulation. I was finally free. The Betrayed Sacrifice, Part 4. A week passed, and for the first time in years, I felt peaceful. No sudden phone calls begging for money, no guilt-tripping texts, no forced responsibility. It was like a weight had been lifted off my chest. Anna and I spent our nights watching movies, cooking together, and actually enjoying life. But deep down, a part of me knew this wasn't over. And I was right. One evening, as I scrolled through my messages, a new notification popped up. Incoming call. Mom. I sighed. She just doesn't give up, does she? Anna muttered, glancing at my phone. I hit decline. Seconds later, a text followed. Mom, Mike, please, just hear me out. I stared at the message for a moment before typing back. There's nothing left to say. A few minutes passed, then another message. Mom, your father is in the hospital. My stomach twisted. As much as I wanted to be free from them, I wasn't heartless. Anna noticed the change in my expression. What now? I showed her the message. She sighed. Do you believe her? That was the problem. I didn't know. After a few moments, I grabbed my keys. I have to check. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and quiet suffering. When I arrived, I spotted my mother in the waiting area. She looked up, eyes red and puffy. Mike, thank God you're here. I kept my distance. Where is he? She pointed to a room down the hall. Without another word, I walked past her and stepped inside. There he was, my father, hooked up to an IV, looking paler than I had ever seen him. For a brief moment, I felt something, pity, concern, but then I saw it. A discharge form sitting on the bedside table. He wasn't dying, he was being released in the morning. I turned back to my mother, who had followed me inside. So this was just another manipulation tactic? She gasped, playing innocent. No, Mike, he really was sick. I held up the paper. He's stable. They're sending him home tomorrow. You made it seem like he was on his deathbed." She fumbled for words, but the guilt was written all over her face. I thought if you came here, you'd..." I cut her off. "You thought I'd forgive you, that I'd go back to giving you money." Her silence was my answer. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "You really don't know when to stop." She reached for my hand. "Please, Mike, we need help." I pulled away. "No, you want help. There's a difference." She started crying, but I wasn't falling for it this time. I turned on my heel and walked away, not looking back. That night, as I lay in bed, Anna curled up beside me and whispered, "Are you okay?" I thought about it for a moment, then I nodded. "Yeah, for the first time in a long time, I am." What would you have done in my situation? Would you have forgiven them? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next part of the story. The Final Goodbye, Part 5. That night, I barely slept. Even though I had walked away, my mind kept replaying the hospital scene. The look in my mother's eyes, the disappointment in my father's weak expression. But I knew better now. They didn't want me. They wanted what I could give them. The next morning, as I sipped my coffee, Anna sat across from me, watching me closely. "You're thinking about them, aren't you?" I exhaled. "I guess a part of me always will." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "That's normal, but you have to remember why you walked away." I nodded. She was right. I had spent years sacrificing my happiness for people who only saw me as a bank account. A problem solver. Never a son. Still, a part of me wanted closure. I needed to end this once and for all. That afternoon, I drove to my parents' house. The place looked smaller than I remembered, almost unfamiliar. I hesitated for a moment before knocking on the door. After a few seconds, my mother opened it. Her face lit up in surprise. "Mike, you came back." I nodded, stepping inside. My father was sitting on the couch, looking stronger than he had at the hospital. He barely acknowledged me. I got straight to the point. "I didn't come here to stay. I came to say goodbye." My mother's smile faded. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath. "I've spent my entire life trying to fix things for you, paying your debts, cleaning up your messes, feeling guilty for things that weren't my fault." She opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. "I'm done. I'm not your savior. I'm not your backup plan. I'm your son, but you never treated me like one." Silence filled the room. My father finally looked up, his expression unreadable. "So that's it?" he muttered. "You're walking away? After everything we've done for you?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Everything you've done for me? What exactly was that?" More silence. I turned to my mother, who had tears in her eyes. "I hope you figure things out, but I won't be part of it anymore." And with that, I turned around and walked out the door. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. When I got home, Anna was waiting for me. "How did it go?" I smiled for the first time in a long time, better than I expected. She hugged me, and for the first time I felt like I truly belonged somewhere. With her. With my new life. A new journey. Part 6. After leaving my parents' house, I felt lighter than ever. No more worries about being used, no more feeling trapped in responsibilities that weren't mine. I was free. But with this freedom came a big question. What do I do now? Anna understood me better than anyone. That evening, as we sat together on the balcony, she gently asked, "So, what do you plan to do next?" I stayed silent for a while, gazing at the city lights flickering in the night. I had spent my whole life doing what others expected of me. Now that no one was controlling my life anymore, I realized I had never truly lived for myself. I turned to Anna and smiled. "I want to start over, a life that truly belongs to me." She smiled back. "Then let's find a new path together." She said, "Let's, instead of you." That was when I understood. I was no longer alone. The next day, I decided to quit my old job. It was once my pride, but I realized that I had only been working hard to support a family that never appreciated me. I no longer wanted to live just to please others. I wanted to pursue my true passion. "Do you remember when you wanted to be a writer as a kid?" Anna reminded me, her eyes filled with excitement. I chuckled. "I haven't thought about that in years." "Well, maybe it's time to start remembering." Her words stuck with me all night. Writing had always been my passion, but I had never dared to take it seriously. This time, I decided it would be different. I opened my laptop, placed my fingers on the keyboard, and started writing my first story. We can't change the past, but we can decide our future. I had chosen my own path, and I hope you will too. What do you think about my decision? Leave a comment below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next part of the story. A New Beginning, Part 7, Final Chapter. After weeks of rebuilding my life, things finally started to settle. I no longer woke up with the weight of financial obligations that weren't mine. I no longer felt the constant pressure to prove my worth to people who never truly valued me. For the first time in years, I was at peace. One morning, as I was sipping my coffee and reading through some emails, my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number. Normally, I would ignore it, but something told me to pick up. Hello? A hesitant voice came through the line. Mike, it's Laura. I leaned back in my chair, surprised. It had been weeks since I last heard from her. After her divorce and moving back in with our parents, she had completely disappeared from my life. What do you want? I asked, my voice calm but distant. She let out a shaky sigh. I wanted to say that I get it now. Silence hung between us. I didn't respond, waiting for her to continue. I always thought you were overreacting, that you were being dramatic about how Mom and Dad treated you. But now that I'm the one they expect money from, I finally understand. Her voice cracked. For the first time, there was no arrogance, no superiority, just exhaustion. They keep asking me for money, guilt-tripping me just like they did to you. And when I told them no, Mom called me ungrateful. Dad said I was selfish. I sighed. I told you, Laura, this is who they are. I know, she admitted, and I'm sorry, Mike, for everything. I didn't say anything right away. A part of me wanted to tell her it was too late. Another part of me, one that still remembered the bond we had as kids, felt a small twinge of sympathy. Finally, I spoke. It's not me you need to apologize to. It's yourself. She let out a quiet, bitter laugh. Yeah? I guess I do. After hanging up, I sat in silence for a while, thinking. My parents had lost both of us, and Laura had finally seen the truth. But it wasn't my problem anymore. I had moved on, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly free. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I truly appreciate every moment you spent reading, feeling, and reflecting on this story. This is not just a story, it's a collection of real emotions and valuable lessons that I wanted to assess. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever experienced something similar? What would you do in this situation? Leave a comment below. Your opinion means to import. Once again, thank you. See you in the next story.